Hello and welcome back to another FPL team selection video. Today we have our game week 35 team and we have just had our double game week 36 announcements, and it basically means there's not going to be any more doubles or blank game weeks for the remainder of the season, and we're going to get into that in today's video. But first we have to look at our game week 34 team, which is our free hit squad, which absolutely went fantastically. We got 81 points and climbed over 100,000 places. And at this point, with only 4 game weeks to go, I'm still kind of aiming for that, kind of top 250,000. That seems to be the only kind of achievable goal that I can get at this stage of the season. And we done really well with our free hit, getting the 81 points. And we still have Embuemo to go tonight as well. So hopefully you can do really nicely and we can jump up even into the top 400k before the game week 35 deadline. But, like I said, everything went so well. Sessegnon, Aït-Nouri. We ended up going for Sessegnon and Pope, which was a lot better than our other choice, which was Leno and Livramento, I believe. Obviously, Trippier was the big player in defence this week. Personally, I wasn't really considering him. He was on the short list, but I would have went for Livramento had I picked a Newcastle defender, so I wasn't too worried about that. Sa was also on the short list, but I wasn't going to double up on the Wolves defence. He ended up doing really well with his penalty save and clean sheet as well. But, happy enough with Nick Pope's clean sheet points. The only 2 players that didn't do well for me was Virgil van Dijk and Evan Nilsson. Evan Nilsson started off really nicely, picking up an assist, but then he obviously got red carded, which totally wiped those points out. And at least it wasn't minus at the end of the day, so only 2 points for him, which isn't really too bad. Obviously his red card's now been rescinded, but I'm not going to get those points back. But like I said, it's not the end of the world. Van Dijk with a 2-pointer wasn't too great either, but he was always going to be in my team, so I'm not really too fussed about that one. In midfield, Mitoma was my big punt this week. He obviously never started, which wasn't great, but he did come off the bench and score, which was fantastic, picking up 6 points, which matches the likes of Murphy and Isak. So a really nice pick in there, and overall just a fantastic week. So for this week, we have our fixtures on the board now, and with no double game weeks for Spurs, Villa, Bournemouth, City, it's really just a straight line until the end of the season. Everyone's just got 1 fixture per game week, so if you've got chips remaining, it's not really looking too great at this point. Personally, I've used all my chips, so it's really just trying to navigate stuff as much as possible. I've got 4 transfers in the bank, which I may be looking to use all this week and do a little bit of a mini wild card towards the end of the season now that we have all of the fixtures. But this is our best fixtures basically for this week. We've got the 4 teams. Obviously Leicester and Southampton are playing against each other, but no one's really going to be looking to pick any of those guys. So we've got 4 teams with green fixtures this week. It's Everton, Brentford, West Ham and Spurs. So they're going to be the teams that you want to be looking at for this week. Obviously Spurs would have been a decent one if they had that double in game week 36, but it doesn't look like it is going to be happening. And then we've got City and Villa, who I have added in here because they've got okay fixtures this week at home and they have a pretty decent run until the end of the season. So with my 4 banked transfers, these are the teams that I'm going to be mainly looking at, and one team that I'm very interested in is going to be Everton, because they have got Ipswich at home and Southampton at home in the next 3 game weeks, and they have been very solid defensively. As you can see, they are the 4th best defence so far this season, with only 41.6 expected goals conceded. And like I say, with Ipswich and Southampton, very poor teams who are now already relegated, so I would be banking very heavily on 2 Everton clean sheets in there. And the game against Fulham isn't too great either. You can see Fulham are in there as one of the best defences, so if you're a gambling person, a wee 0-0 in there, I wouldn't be too surprised at, but I think Fulham could score in that match, so whoever bring in Everton defence wise is probably getting benched before coming back in against Southampton. They haven't been the best defence in the last 5 game weeks. They're sitting at mid-table in 10th, but again, there's not really too much to go off of. It's only 5 game weeks, with 6.8 expected goals conceded in there. Everyone is going to be fairly close together. So one extra game on there could see Everton move to like 4th, and all of a sudden they are one of the better ones. But like I say, over the course of the season, excluding Liverpool and Arsenal, Fulham and Everton are the 2 best defences. So with those game weeks and with those games in game week 35 and 37, I would be very much interested in some of their players. Now, looking at who could potentially be a pick, obviously Tarkowski's right at the top there for expected goal involvement over the course of the season, but he's now picked up an injury, which again could weaken the Everton defence, so the clean sheets maybe aren't as nailed as they would have been had Tarkowski still been available. So that is just something that you are going to have to watch out on. There is Mykolenko as well, who has been decent over the course of the season, but his minutes recently haven't been too great. Now, the one I am definitely considering is Jared Branthwaite, who is up there for XGI over the course of the season and is at the top for XGI since in the last 5 game weeks as well. But the one who is also on my mind is going to be Jake O'Brien, who plays as the wing back. I think it's the right back for Everton, and he scored 2 goals recently for Everton and is the highest point scorer. So he is the one who I am seeing in a lot of teams. A lot of wildcard teams are bringing in O'Brien, and if I was going to go for a double up, which I do think is viable and something that I think as someone on like a lower rank could be a big differential to maybe go for O'Brien and Branthwaite. They would be the 2 that I would be tempted with. I think overall I'm going to go with O'Brien because he is the fullback and is more likely to get forward and score goals, get assists. But Branthwaite definitely would be my second option if I was going to go for the double up in defence. And then there's also Pickford as well, so the triple up is definitely an option because Pickford's obviously been one of the best goalkeepers so far this season when it comes to saves. He's got a couple of assists in there as well, and of course clean sheets. Now back onto the fixtures, we've also got Brentford in here who have Manchester United at home, and they also have Ipswich next week, and again a very nice run until the end of the season. So players like Mbeumo and Wissa are definitely on the shortlist for this week as potential transfers. Then we've got West Ham as well, who are playing against Spurs, who this game's right in between Spurs' semi-final, so they're playing 2 days after the semi-final, and they may rest the entire team depending on how that match goes for the second leg in the semi-final next Thursday as well. So West Ham, Bowen looking like a really decent option who has been on good form as well recently, and their run to the end of the season isn't too bad. You can see Man United in there, who again haven't really been great so far this season, and Nottingham Forest, who have been actually one of the worst defences in the most recent games. In the last 5 games they have been up there with the likes of Leicester, Southampton and Ipswich in terms of defensive numbers. So again, it is another match where Bowen could do quite well, and then obviously Ipswich in game week 38, which I would definitely back him to get something in. So Bowen's also on the list, as well as Mbeumo, as well as Wissa, as well as the Everton defence. Spurs I'm not really interested in anymore. I think obviously with their Europa League run they are going to be heavily focused on that now that they are safe from relegation. So there's not really any Spurs players that do come to mind when I think of FPL picks. For Man City, I've got Marmoush, I've got Savinho, and I've got Vardiol. The only issue is obviously Savinho's minutes. I think everyone else is totally fine. Vardiol and Marmoush, 2 absolute mainstays in the team. Other than that, as much as I would like to keep Savinho, Southampton away next week could be a very good fixture, but I just can't guarantee that he's going to start. And if he does come on the bench, recently it's only been like 9 or 10 minutes that he's been getting, not enough to make an impact, and definitely not someone I want in my FPL team. So he may be coming out as well, and I don't really think there's any other Man City players that I could be wanting to replace him. And then with Aston Villa, again, a decent run to the end of the season, but now the fact that they aren't going to be double in game week 36 means I'm probably going to look elsewhere from their players. Rodgers and Watkins were 2 players that were on the shortlist. Watkins, obviously with Rashford out injured, was going to be a really nice option that I was going to consider this week, but not having a double really makes them a lot less appealing. Now, before making any transfers this week, this is how my team is looking, and it's looking like a very solid team still. I think if I didn't have 4 transfers in the bank and I maybe had 1 or 2, I'd really be looking towards, just rolling this week, because my team has good fixtures on paper. A lot of players are playing at home this week. I've only really got my Murphy, Isak and Salah playing away from home. Again, like I said, with Nottingham Forest not being one of the better defences, the triple up of Palace isn't actually that bad, despite, you know, not really being in the best of form recently. And then, of course, even on the bench, I've got Savinho, who, again, as I said, does have a good fixture, but I can't guarantee that he is going to start. But this week, I still think I am going to make some transfers, because I think I've got a lot of minute risk players, and there is just players that I think are just going to be better in the long term. Now, Saka is one player that I'm definitely looking at getting rid of. As it stands, his minutes just haven't really been too great, and against Bournemouth, he is only expected to get about 59. Then after that fixture, he's got two really tough games against Liverpool and Newcastle, and obviously we are very heavily focused on the Champions League when it comes to Arsenal right now as well, so Saka's minutes are probably going to be very limited until the end of the season. So it's only really that game week 38 fixture where Saka is an option, and I could always save some more transfers and bring him back in then. But right now, as I say, hard fixtures, limited minutes, and he's only got one goal since he's returned, and it was off the bench in his first match back, which is what reeled everyone in the first place, and he hasn't really got anything since then. So I think at this point I'm going to look to sell and get in someone like an Mbeumo or a Bowen, who is just going to be a lot more minutes secure and maybe just better until the end of the season. So with that being said, I'm looking to use all 4 transfers this week, and these are the moves that I'm looking at making. We're taking out Saka for Mbeumo. Like I said, Brentford have really, really nice fixtures until the end of the season, and that's why we're also going to be bringing in Wissa for Mateta. Again, would like to keep Mateta, I think, because it is one of those games where he could easily score against Nottingham Forest, but his minutes aren't too great. He's only expected to play 78 minutes this week, and Wissa just has a better fixture, in my opinion, against Man United this week, and he's in better form, and he has the better fixture next week against Ipswich. So it just seems like a bit of a sideways move, but I feel like it's a position of this season now where you might as well make those moves with only 4 game weeks to go. And then we're bringing in Bowen as well. Again, a really nice fixture against Spurs, as I already mentioned. Savinho is going to be coming out, as he is a bit of a minutes risk, unfortunately. And finally, we're only going to be bringing in one Everton defender. We're taking out Cucurella, who doesn't have great fixtures until the end of the season, and I would find myself benching him quite a lot. And Jake O'Brien is going to be coming in. So that is going to give me a team that looks like this. Now, a very strong team. I think it looks a lot like, you know, very similar to what a lot of wildcard teams might look like this week. I think the defence is very, very solid. We've got the double Arsenal against Bournemouth, where I would hope that it could keep a clean sheet. Vardiol, obviously the best defender in the game, I would argue, with a really nice fixture again against Wolves. Munoz is still in the team. I don't want to get rid of all of my Palace players against Forest. Obviously Munoz is a big attacking threat as well, so he is definitely someone that I would want to have for that fixture. Then we're bringing in Jake O'Brien. Again, like I said, I definitely would like maybe the double up on Everton as a big differential, but there's no one else in this team I don't think that I would want to be benching when it comes to the attack. So we're going to be settling for one Everton defender against Ipswich, and then maybe look towards a second one when they go to play Southampton in game week 37. The midfield is probably the most ideal midfield you can get for this week, with Salah and Mbeumo and Bowen. Already spoke pretty much on all of those guys. And then up front we've got Isak, Marmoush and Wissa. Now, I did definitely consider selling Isak instead of selling Mateta, but I think we're kind of in that position where Isak's still the best forward in the game. I don't really want to be selling him and then stuck without him until the end of the season. So he's still going to be here, and I'm probably just going to play him through the difficult fixtures and hope that he can do well in those. Now, the reason I've benched Murphy, again, Murphy's on really nice form, but again, his minutes are a little bit of an issue, and historically, Newcastle have been pretty poor against Brighton away from home, so I don't want to fully load up on Newcastle players. I feel like Isak is enough, and in a week where it's very difficult to try and bench players, I feel like it just makes most sense to go for Murphy on the bench. Now, Sarr's also on the bench, again someone I would ideally like to play, but there's just no one in that team where I feel like is going to be worse than Sarr is. So Sarr's making the bench as well. It's actually a pretty decent week for another bench boost, but obviously we don't have that remaining, so this is just what we're going to deal with. Now, the captaincy is still on Marmoush, but I think I'm going to change it at some point and maybe just go very differential. I think Bowen is someone who could take the armband as a differential, maybe even O'Brien. and hopefully that Everton clean sheet comes in, and if we can get a goal and an assist out of him, that would be absolutely fantastic. That would be very rogue though if we were going to go that route. There's obviously Vardiol, who could be a captaincy pick, and hope that he can pick up a goal. I don't know, it's obviously tough. Obviously our captaincy video, Marmoush was the one to go for, but I'm just personally not really feeling it, and I feel like this is probably the best week all season where you can just go for someone totally differential, and obviously I need to try chase rank at this point, so it makes the most sense for me in this position. But that is going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, make sure to subscribe as well, and let me know what you think of my moves down in the comments. Is it a waste of transfers, or would you do anything a little bit different? So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.